All right, so we're going to be on page 1 of our packet. Today we're going to be talking about classifying and writing polynomials, and then we're going to go into some operations with polynomials. So, a polynomial is a monomial, or the sum or difference of two or more monomials. These are called terms. So polynomials, they are named according to their degree and their number of terms. So when we say degree, we're not talking about angle measure, 70 degrees, nothing like that. The degree of a polynomial is the highest exponent of the term. So first we're going to go through a table of the degree and what we call that, and then we'll go through the number of terms and what we'll call that. So looking at the first one, we have 7. So if you're looking at the highest exponent, what's the exponent of this polynomial? We don't have an exponent, right? So it would be, your degree number is 0. And the name of that is just going to be a constant, because you don't have an exponent, so it's just a number. Your next one, 4x. What's the degree? What's the number? What's the exponent on that? 1. And so the name of that, we're going to call that linear. Linear just means a line. 4x is just a line. Yeah.
Is it constant like every time it's 0?
Yeah, so as long as there's no exponent, you're going to have a constant. The constant, essentially, if you were to graph a constant, it's just a straight line. So like if you had y equals 7, it'd just be a line at 7. But then looking at your next one, your highest exponent, what is that? 2. So our degree is going to be 2, and we're going to call that a quadratic. All right. Now on this next one, I want you guys to cross out. Don't worry about the x, right? We're going to cross out that x for now. I'll talk about that in a minute. Just because, for sake of the table looking nice, it's easier to go this route, and then I'll cover when we have multiple variables after I finish the table. So you've got -5y cubed. What's our highest exponent on that? 3. And we're going to call that cubic. And then our last one, the highest exponent is 4. And then we're going to call that quartic. So now this is where you're going to see why I didn't want to mess up the table. So if we bring down what we had, we've got 5xy cubed. Now, what do you think the degree of this is?
3.
4. Do you know why it's 4?
Because x is 1.
Yeah. So you've got a 1 there. So this is technically a quartic function, or quartic polynomial, because you've got, just like when you do the product rule, you're going to add the exponents together because you only have one term here. And your terms are going to be what's separated by the operations plus minus. Okay, so we've got our degrees. Now let's talk about the number of terms. There is one term in this first one, and we're going to call that a monomial. Now, something you're going to notice about most of these terms, and most math terms in general, is 90% of your math terms are Latin or Greek, and they are going to translate exactly to what you would think they mean. So monomial, mono means one term. We've got 2 terms here. Binomial. You can think of it like a bike. There's two wheels, two turns. Same thing with 3. What has 3 wheels? So we're going to call that a trinomial. Now, math people, when they get to over 3, when you're naming polynomials, just get kind of lazy. So we've got 4 terms here, and we're just going to call it a polynomial. So once it's over 3, it's just a polynomial. Nothing special. And then one more thing to note about degree, I forgot to mention. If you get over 4, it's just the number degree. So if it's 5, you'd have to the 5th degree, 6th degree, and so on. Are there any questions so far? All right. So now we're going to move on to something else. So one of the most important parts about this, actually. So we've got. So down here, I'll go ahead and do this. So this is called standard form. And standard form is the way we write a polynomial when the exponents are in descending order. So you're going to start at your highest. You're going to start at your highest exponent. And go to your lowest. So you're going to move to your lowest. So looking at this one here, is 3x squared plus 2x plus 1. Is that in standard form? Is that written from highest exponent to lowest?
Yeah.
All right. Now then, what about 4x to the 4th plus 3y minus 1? Is that written in standard form?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Now, let's turn our attention to this one. Is number 1, 4 plus 3x minus 5x to the 4th plus 2x squared written in standard form?
No.
No, it's not. All right. So, what are we going to do to this to move it into standard form?
Jacob, you can bring your phone up here. I'm gonna pull on it for the rest of the class. You can put your phone up here.
So
Bring it up here.
we're going to move this around to write it from highest to lowest exponent. So the first thing we've got is what's our highest exponent? We got x to the 4th. So we're going to bring the coefficient and its sign with it. You've got to make sure you bring the sign with it. Otherwise, you will have a completely different polynomial. So it's negative 5 x to the 4th. And then your next highest exponent is going to be your 2x squared. So you take the coefficient as well as your sign. So you're plus 2x to the 4th, or x squared. And our next highest is 3x, and we're left with our constant of 4. Is this written in standard form now?
Yes.
Yes, it is. All right. So that's going to be your first example on these 10 blanks at the bottom here. Does everybody have this chart?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down just so I can write these in the chart and make it a little bit easier. So I'm going to do the first. All right, I'm going to do the first one with you. I'm going to write the first one down. So we've got negative 5x to the 4th plus 2x squared plus 3x plus 4. So in this middle column here, you're going to classify each one of these that are written on the board over here by its degree. So what's the degree of number 1?
It's the same.
So we've got our highest exponent of 4, right?
Yeah.
So what is that? What are we going to call that?
Polynomial.
You're looking at degree. Remember, highest exponent.
So quad.
Oh, quartic.
Quartic. And now, this one will be number of terms, your last column. So how many terms do we have? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. More than 3, polynomial. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do the second one as well. So we've got 3x squared plus 2x minus 3. So what's the degree of this one? If you're looking at highest exponent.
Linear, cubic.
Quadratic. Why? Why is it quadratic?
Because there's
Because there's 3 as an exponent too.
Yep. And then how many terms do we've got? We've got 3. Trinomial. All right, so I want you guys to do the rest. So from 3 to 10, go ahead and write the equation here. Then you're going to categorize it by degree, and then by the number of terms. And then if you finish that, you can go ahead and move on to the second page and start working on that. We'll all come back and talk about these, and then we'll go through that second page together. But if you guys want to go ahead and start working on it, you can. Are there any questions so far?
Mr. Price.
Yeah.
Are the big numbers the terms, or is it the exponents?
For what are you looking at for?
I'm looking at like number 3.
So number 3, you're going to be, so your terms are going to be, your term would be this and that. Your exponent would be you're looking at for your degree, you're looking at the highest exponent, which would be that 3 there.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
On this one? Yeah. So yes.
There's a pencil that you can use as a picture. Yeah, you can always bring yours to lunch. I'm gonna live here alone. And I don't have it that far, so if I can work with you, I can do maybe. Or I can, I have it too. do you have a lunch? Okay, so let me look up when the student has lunch, and we'll start on Friday. Are you gonna be here on Friday?
Yeah. Coach, they want.
So
Okay, so for your classes, your time is really available for it, you'll come here for that one, and then you can go to church for whatever else, whatever.
Does the exponent count?
No, so it's just one whole.
Okay.
The whole. Looking at two. Go.
What? Oh, no. No. I've just been sitting there staring at it. Katie has the first visit right there on the top.
All right, I know some of you may not be completely done yet, but we're gonna go ahead and go through these. So looking at 3, what's the degree of 3? Cubic. And then how many terms? We've got 2 terms, so what do we call that?
Binomial.
Yep. Now number 4, 8x squared. Quadratic. Yep. And it's a monomial. Number 5,
Constant.
constant.
Monomial.
Yep. And then number 6,
Quadratic.
quadratic. And yeah, it's a trinomial. And then number 7,
Cubic.
cubic.
Monomial.
Can you tell me what?
Because you add both of the exponents.
Yep. So you've got, technically, remember, you've got an exponent of 1 with that x. And since that's a single term, you're going to add the exponents together. So you have a degree of 3, which is cubic. And then what are we going to call that in terms? Monomial. Number 8, what's our degree?
Quadratic.
Yeah, cubic. I didn't write the whole problem down. So looking at this one, not what's on the board, because I obviously didn't finish writing it down. 2x. There you go. So what's our number of terms? What are we going to call that?
Polynomial.
Yep. And then number 9, quartic. How many is that?
trinomial.
We've got 1,
Oh.
2,
I
3,
didn't see
4,
that.
5.
Okay, so
Polynomial.
Polynomial.
I couldn't see that one.
In your defense, I did write it a little small. And then what's our last one? What's our degree? Cubic. And then how many terms?
2.
So
Two.
trinomial.
Yep. All right. Does everybody understand this, or are there any questions? All right. We can go ahead and we'll move on to that next page, the second page. So just a note on this second page here, in your word bank, you can get rid of the fourth degree and write quartic. It's the same thing, but we use quartic, and you will probably see quartic on the EOC more likely than fourth degree. Like I said, usually after 4, that's when you start seeing the numbers. So, looking at these, we're going to do the same thing we did with all of these examples. So we're going to categorize it by degree and then by number of terms. The first one's already been done for us, so it's cubic and it's a binomial because it's got 2 terms. Our second one, is that in standard form?
No.
Correct. So, what do we need to do to it to make it into standard form?
Swap the negative 4, so the exponent of 2 goes first, and then the exponent of like 5 is 1.
Yeah. So it would turn into negative 4x squared plus 5x. So now what's our degree? What's the number? So our highest exponent is
Quadratic.
2. Yep, so quadratic. And then how many terms do we have?
Binomial.
Yep. Number 3.
Constant monomial.
Yep. Constant. Monomial. And then 4.
A linear binomial.
Yep. And number 5. What do we got for
Quadratic.
degree? Yep, quadratic.
Trinomial.
Yep. Trinomial. Number 6, 3x squared plus 6x.
Quadratic. Binomial.
Yep. So it's a quadratic binomial. Number 7, 4x to the 4th plus 6x cubed plus 2x squared.
That would be quartic.
Quartic. Yep.
And then trinomial.
Yep. Now on number 8, all that arrow in 2 is pointing to is just telling you that the degree of 2. Don't really know why they did it on that one, but none of the other ones. We didn't make this worksheet, so there's that. What's our degree? Which is going to be quadratic. And then how many terms?
Binomial.
Yep. And then number 9. What's our degree?
Quartic.
Quartic.
Monomial.
Yep. All right. So that's about it for classifying the polynomials. Now we're going to move on to operations if there's no more questions. All right. Okay. So Now we're going to move on to adding and subtracting, and then we'll do a little bit of division and multiplication. What you're going to notice is this is very similar to everything else we covered in the beginning of this semester with exponent rules. So you're going to be combining like terms for your addition and subtraction. Addition is pretty straightforward. Subtraction, there's just an extra step. So, and let me go ahead and say the most important thing to note when you are writing these answers, you need to write them in standard form. It just makes it easier for us, and there are a lot of teachers that will take off points for not writing in standard form. So, as long as there is nothing in front of the first parentheses, you can just bring it down. So 18x squared minus 2x plus 15. And then there's nothing, you don't have a multiplier or anything in front of the second one, so you could just bring that down too, because you're going to distribute the plus, but it's really not going to change anything. So because you've got, technically that would be a positive 1. So 1 times positive 3x squared is still 3x squared. Positive 1 times negative 10 is still negative 10. And positive 1 times negative 8x is still negative 8x. Now what you're going to do is you're going to look for and figure out what's your highest term, which would be your x squareds. So you're going to combine those together first. You'll be combining like terms. So your x squareds, you know you can combine because they are both x squared. So you got 18 plus 3 is 21 x squared. And then you can go ahead and cross it out if that helps so that you don't accidentally count them again. Then you're left with your next step down would be, okay, what x's do I have? You've got a negative 2x and a negative 8x. So negative 2 plus negative 8 is negative 10x. You can cross those out. And you've got, all that's left is your constant term, which would be 15 minus 10 is positive 5. And that is your answer, 21x squared minus 10x plus 5. So, knowing this, let's look at subtraction. So you've got 6x squared plus 7x minus 10x minus 3x squared plus 2. Your goal is to make this look like your addition, because we already know how to do addition. Addition's easy to do. We need to make this subtraction look the same way so that we can do it. So we can go ahead and bring down our 6x squared plus 7x, because again, there's nothing in front of that parentheses that constitutes changing that. Now we want to make this minus into a positive. So what we can do is we can take this minus sign and change it into a plus negative 1. So now you've got a negative 1 outside of that parentheses, and you're going to distribute that to each term inside the parentheses. So you can actually get rid of these parentheses if you want. You don't need them. So we've got negative 1 times positive 10x is going to give you a negative 10x. And you've got negative 1 times positive 3x squared is going to give you a negative 3x squared. And then you've got negative 1 times positive 2 is going to give you a negative 2. So now we're back to where we were with addition, and we can just combine like terms. So we've got our highest degree here, our highest exponent is x squared. We've got 6x squared minus 3x squared, it's still 3x squared. And cross those out. And we've got 7x minus 10x. That leaves you with negative 3x. And then your negative 2 is, or your minus 2 is all that's left. There's no more constant. So your answer becomes 3x squared minus 3x minus 2. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
The most important thing is to make sure you distribute that negative to everything inside that parentheses. Otherwise, your answer will not be correct. All right.
Wait.
Yeah.
Would you always, if there's a negative there, would you always have to multiply by 1, or is it always going to be negative 1 times the number, or is it going to change?
The only time it'll change is if there's a number in front of that parentheses to begin with. So, like, if it was 6x squared plus 7x minus 3, and then the parentheses of 10x squared plus 3x, or 10x plus 3x squared plus 2, then you would multiply by negative 3 instead of just 3.
Right.
Because there's technically a 1 out front of the parentheses, technicality speaking. So I'm going to have you guys do 1, 2, and 3, and we'll come back and talk about them. If you finish that before we come back to talk about them as a class, you guys can go ahead and do part 1 and part 2 on pages 4 and 5, or pages 4, it'd be page 4 of your homework.
So under equation 2 and negative 1, so does it cancel out? I mean, that cancels out too. Does that cancel What are you doing?
So x squared minus x squared.
Go to figure out.
And what is log x? Which is different number, especially look, it's just the trinomial.
X squared plus 6x plus 10. It's squared. Different. So negative 5 is there. Doesn't matter. A plus or 100%. Thank you. You're taking a
All right.
Best pizza.
Can somebody give me their answer for number 1?
I got okay.
5x squared plus 6x plus 10.
Did everybody get that?
I swapped the 6 in the final accident.
Just remember you have to write them in standard form, so exponents from highest to lowest. Can somebody do? You can just say it out.
Alright, negative 5x squared minus 4x plus 10.
Does everyone agree with that?
Yes.
All right. How about 3? What'd you get?
0.
0. Because if you notice, x squared plus 6x minus 4 minus x squared plus 6x minus 4. They're exactly the same. It's the same thing as taking 1 minus 1 or 2 minus 2. It's the same thing. It just everything cancels out. So now we need to classify these by degree and the number of terms. So what's our degree on number 1?
It's 2.
2. So what do we call that?
Quadratic.
Yep. The quadratic. And then
Cubic.
what's the number of terms?
3.
3. So what do we call that?
Cubic.
Polynomial.
Oh yeah, try to.
All right. And number 2. What are we going to call that one if we classify it by degree? Quadratic, because our highest exponent is 2. And then by number of terms, what are we going to call it? Trinomial. Bless you. And then number 3, what are we going to call that if we classify it by degree? Constant. And then what do we call it if we classify by number of terms? Monomial. So how are we feeling with adding and subtracting polynomials? Thumbs up, thumbs down. All right. So that is the end of that part. If you guys want to turn to page 5 of your, this will be the last page of your homework. I'm going to do a couple examples of multiplication and division real quick. Where we're looking at part 5, part 6, and part 7. So, when we multiply monomials, it's the same thing as multiplying powers, the power rule, product rule. So we've got 2x times 4x squared. So we'll multiply the coefficients first. Leaves us with 8. And then x times x squared is going to give us, we're going to add the powers. So we'll have 1 plus 2 is 3. So you have 8x cubed.
That's it?
Yep, that's all you got to do. And 21, you're multiplying by a binomial. Just make sure you distribute what's outside the parentheses to both of them, much like we did when we were adding and subtracting, and you multiplied in the -1 to the trinomial that we did on the board. Or however, polynomial, whatever you want to, whatever you're multiplying into, you need to make sure you distribute it to everything in the parentheses. So if we do 21, you've got 4x because you hit the first one, and you go to the second one, and you got 8. So it's 4x plus 8. Same thing when you go with one with a variable. You've got negative x squared times x plus 5. So negative x squared times x is going to give you, what is that going to give you?
Oh,
So multiply the coefficient first. So -1 times 1 is going to give you negative. And then x squared times x, if you add the powers,
negative.
so you've got x squared, and then remember that x technically still has the power of 1.
Just negative x.
No. So you're going to add the power, you're multiplying, you're not dividing here. So you're going to add the powers together, which is x cubed. And then again, you'll move on to the second one. You've got positive 5 times -1 gives you -5. And then you don't have a variable there, so you can just multiply, and you just have x squared. Does that make sense? So coefficient, and then follow your product rule. I'm going to scroll down so we can see all of part 7. I'm going to go over the division real quick. Okay. I'm going to do number 28 and 32. So 28, we've got a binomial divided by a monomial. So we can split this up into 2. So you've got negative 15x over 5 plus 10 over 5. 6. So we'll take care of the first one first. What's negative 5 divided by, or negative 15 divided by 5? Negative 3, yep. And we don't have a variable on the bottom, so we'll just leave the variable x alone. And 10 divided by 5?
5, 2.
2. So our answer is negative 3x plus 2. Now then when we go to one with a variable, we can do the same thing, split it up. So you've got 20x to the 4th. 2. 20x to the 4th over 5x squared plus 15x squared over 5x squared. So we'll split it up. Take care of the first one first. What's 20 divided by 5? 4. And what's x to the 4th divided by x squared? Remember, we subtract exponents with the quotient rule. X squared. And then what's 15 divided by 5? 3. And what's x squared divided by x squared?
1.
Yeah, it's just 1, so it just goes away. So your answer is 4x squared plus 3. Is everybody good with multiplying and dividing monomials? Are there any questions? All right, so your homework is pages 4 and 5. And then they've got a quiz next class period, right? And you guys will take a quiz over this next class period.
It's the same quiz as the pre-test.